did you know that Super Mario Bros. 2 is actually a completely different game called Doki? No, hold on. Alright, so if you're watching this video, chances are you already know the general story of Super Mario Bros. 2. I mean, this is one of the most well-known pieces of video game trivia out there. At this point, I'd be more surprised if you didn't know. But just in case you're one of the very few people out there who have no idea what I'm talking about, let me give you the quickest rundown I possibly can. So in late 1985, Nintendo released the very first Super Mario Bros. Game for the NES. Needless to say, it was a massive worldwide success. So obviously, the development team at Nintendo in Japan started working on a sequel shortly after. The idea of it? To be a more difficult version of the original Super Mario Bros. It was released in Japan in June of 1986 with the title Super Mario Bros. 2 for Super Players. And more difficult it sure was. So difficult actually that when it came to releasing the game in North America and other Western countries, Nintendo of America just decided to not localize it and instead asked Nintendo of Japan to give them a different game that they could sell as a Mario title instead. This game turned out to be Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic and is today more commonly known as Super Mario Bros. 2. So yeah, that's pretty much the story of why Super Mario Bros. 2 is a completely different game outside of Japan, and also how it's actually just a reskin of the Japanese game Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic. But here's the thing, what exactly even was Doki Doki Panic, and also why was specifically this game chosen to be reworked and re-released as a Mario game? Let's start with the former question. If you were paying attention up until now, you might have already noticed that the full title of Doki Doki Panic is actually Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic. This tends to be easily forgotten due to people online shortening the name, since saying the full title every time can be a bit of a mouthful. So yes, the full title is once again Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic. This part is actually a very important detail to figuring out what this game really was and how it came to be. In the likely case you didn't know, Yume Kōjō, or Communication Carnival Yume Kōjō, was an event organized by Fuji TV, a major Japanese TV and news company. Yume Kōjō 87 was held in Japan from July 18th to August 30th in the year 1987. The idea of the event was to showcase new innovations in various fields related to digital entertainment, like television and video games, among many other new technologies. The CEO of Fuji TV at the time, Haruo Shikanai, reportedly got the idea for the event while watching the carnival in Brazil in 1984. Looking back, this is especially evident in many attractions and decorations that were scattered around the event. Shotaro Ishinomori, a manga artist who's best known today for creating Kamen Rider, was also in Brazil together with Shikanai. He would also later be heavily involved in the creation of Yume Kōjō 87. Upon returning from Brazil, the two would start working on the event in secret. During this time, they would also come up with the name Yume Kōjō, which roughly translates to Dream Factory. On July 18, 1986, exactly 1 year before the event was set to open to the masses, it was finally publicly announced and Fuji TV would start a massive marketing campaign to promote it. Since the event itself was heavily inspired by the yearly carnival in Brazil, a lot of its marketing and visual identity also reflected this. Various pieces of merchandise were created for the campaign, including many different masks, loosely based on Italian carnival masks, and the event even had its own mascots in the form of an Arabian family referred to as the Imagine family, which might already look familiar to you. This family featured the characters Imagine, his parents who were just called Mama and Papa, his girlfriend Lina, and his twin siblings Pokey and Peaky, and their pet monkey Rusa. This family was also heavily used in promotional material for Yume Kōjō 87. As you might have already been able to guess, Doki Doki Panic was developed by Nintendo as part of this marketing campaign. The game was released about a week before the actual opening of the event on July 10, 1987. Naturally, the marketing of the event also influenced the game's visuals and story. The Imagine family, which I mentioned earlier, was featured as the playable cast, while a lot of masks were scattered all throughout the game. For example, all the level exits were huge masks which let you enter their mouths, upon completing a level. Many of the boss fights and levels also featured numerous different masks, which you could pick up and throw at the bosses or enemies to damage and defeat them. Additionally, some of the enemies also carry masks or even resemble masks in reference to Yume Kōjō, Shy Guys and their variants like Bezos and Sniffits, and also these guys who will start chasing after you when you pick up a key. Of course, Doki Doki Panic also has a story, which goes something like this. Rusa, the pet monkey of the Imagine family, finds an old storybook and brings it to the twins Pokey and Peaky. The storybook tells the story of a dream world called Mu, where people invented the so-called dream machine. This machine is intended to allow the inhabitants of the dream world to create good dreams for themselves, because having good dreams results in good weather the following day. The twins accidentally rip out a page of the book during a fight and subsequently free Mamu, the villain of the book's story. Mamu, who is known as Wart in Super Mario Bros. 2, is an evil frog-like creature who uses the dream machine to create monsters and to terrorize the Mu people. Mamu captures and drags the twins inside the book world, and it is up to our 4 playable main characters to save them by beating multiple levels and finally taking down Mamu of vegetables, because those are his biggest weakness. Hey, maybe he's just allergic. What are you doing, dude? Okay, so let's recap real quick. Yume Kōjō 87 was a technology event held by Fuji TV in 1987. Doki Doki Panic was a video game developed by Nintendo with the purpose of promoting said event. And the reason for the game's unusual cast of characters and story can be attributed to the general marketing of the event, which was heavily inspired by the Brazilian carnival. Okay, so far so good, but there's still one big question that we haven't answered yet, and that is, why was this game specifically chosen to be remade into Super Mario Bros. 2 for Western audiences? Figuring out the answer to this question is actually pretty simple. The first step is making a note of the fact that Doki Doki Panic wasn't actually developed from the ground up as a completely new game. It was instead based on a previously developed prototype thought up by Kensuke Tanabe and Shigeru Miyamoto for a Mario-esque multiplayer game where 2 players could pick up, carry and throw each other. Additionally, the prototype allowed players to pick up and stack blocks, not quite unlike Doki Doki Panic. Something this prototype was also developed for was to test how a game with vertically scrolling levels could work. I should've wondered why I've seen that before. The original prototype that Nintendo came up with was temporarily put on development hold due to it being considered too boring and also too complex to run on Famicom hardware in its current form. However, later on, Nintendo would dig up that old prototype again after being approached by Fuji TV to develop Doki Doki Panic. Given this information, we can already figure out that Doki Doki Panic technically started development as some sort of Mario game before later being repurposed into a promotional game for Yume Kōjō. Additionally, Doki Doki Panic also adapted many other features and aspects of previous Mario games, like the Power Block from the Mario Bros. Arcade game or the Starman power-up from Super Mario Bros. 1. Even some of the sound effects sound similar to ones heard in Super Mario Bros. This can be linked back to Koji Kondo, also working on this game as a composer and sound designer. Given all this information, it is clear why Doki Doki Panic was chosen to be remade into Super Mario Bros. 2. Many of the already somewhat traditional Mario features were already here. The physics and some of the level design, the sound design and music, and some power-ups as well. Pretty much all Nintendo really had to change about this game at this point were the player characters and some of the other references to Yume Kōjō. They replaced all the mask blocks that were scattered around the game with mushroom-shaped blocks, and the level exits also got changed to instead resemble some weird kind of bird head. So yes, funnily enough, the game that originally started development as a possible Mario title and was later repurposed into a completely different game somehow still managed to end up being repurposed a second time into what is now the iconic Super Mario Bros. 2. Technically, Nintendo could have already stopped here and released the game, but they actually went a bit further with the changes. They changed the sprites of extra lives, 1-ups, and some other things here and there to make the game feel a little bit more like a Mario game. For example, these Koopa shells, which previously looked like... They also prettied up the title and bonus screen where you can win extra lives. The best addition by far is being able to run though. Funnily enough, the original Doki Doki Panic did not have this functionality. They also changed the way the character select screen works. In Doki Doki Panic, the game will let you pick a different character after beating each world. But if you picked a different character than the one you played with previously, it would make you beat all the previously uncleared worlds again because every character's world progression was separate. So if you wanted to switch to a different character only for the last world, you would have had to replay the entire game from the beginning with that character. In Super Mario Bros. 2, they changed it so the game would ask you if you wanted to pick a different character after each level, and then would just let you continue the game like normal. This is actually a massive improvement over the original game, thanks Nintendo, I guess. But just briefly, because I have been a bit too positive about this game up until now, do you want to know something that grinds my gears a little? In the original game, when you take damage and you only have one hit left before you die, the character's appearance does not change in the slightest. In Super Mario Bros. 2, however, the characters become small because that's just how it worked in the original Super Mario Bros. Now, this would be a nice little detail if it wasn't for the fact that your hitbox stays the exact same size as before, and now you can die from things that technically don't even touch you. I think this would have been a lot better if they actually also made so the hitbox changes according to your size. Regardless, the amount of effort they put into converting Doki Doki Panic to Super Mario Bros. 2 is actually somewhat commendable because they could have gotten away with a lot less if they wanted to, and the game would have still sold very well, I think. I haven't even mentioned this, but they even bothered to program a completely new boss into the game that was not in the original. This is seriously pretty cool and would have totally not been necessary, but they decided to do it either way, and I think that's neat. The amount of influence that Super Mario Bros. 2 and as a result Doki Doki Panic had on the Mario universe is often overlooked. This game introduced so many now iconic characters and enemies and features that we now consider commonplace and even fundamental to Mario games. Birdo, Shy Guys, Sniffits, Bezos, Bob-Ombs, Pokies, Ninjas, Luigi's Flutter Jump and Peach's floating terrace physics were keys that are required to unlock doors in different parts of a level. These are all things that first appeared in Doki Doki Panic, and Super Mario Bros. 2 keeps inspiring new Mario games to this day. Hell, if you have played Super Mario Bros. Wonder, you might know about the crouching high jump badge. The idea for this badge was directly taken from a feature in Doki Doki Panic, which works the exact same way. It is a shame that a lot of these details about Super Mario Bros. 2 and Doki Doki Panic tend to just be forgotten and overlooked, because a lot of people only keep repeating the already well-known facts instead of actually bringing something new to the table. I mean, let's be honest, how many of you actually knew about Yume Kōjō 87 or what that whole event was even about? Most of you probably didn't, and in that case I hope you have learned something new from this video and you got something that you were able to take away from it. Of course, there's a lot more to this topic than what I've discussed in this video, but I tried to keep it as short and concise as I possibly could so that it wouldn't get too convoluted. If you're interested in finding out more about either the Yume Kōjō 87 event or the differences between Doki Doki Panic and Super Mario Bros. 2, I have two separate videos linked either in the description or the info box up there if that still exists. I used both these videos as sources for this video, and they go into a lot more detail about the respective topics than I ever could. Alright, I think we're done here. By the way, did you know that Mario was actually called Jumpman?